In a world where secrets can be deadly, our fight protagonist is caught in a web of lies that threatens to unravel everything she's worked for. 19 a blessing. Not a curse. My feet stomped along the carpeted floor. I passed several wolves who all eyed me suspiciously. They all wondered what was going on with me, still wary of my presence. By now, I was used to ignoring them. Alpha Gabriel's office doors came into view. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Breaking my stride, my sudden confidence vanished. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. Anticipation crawled up my spine. It was just action. I didn't even kiss him. I tried to reason with myself. It was going to be hard to do, but all I had to do was apologize and tell him I didn't want things to change. Sighing, I focus on the door and clear my mind. I was being dramatic for nothing. Enthusiasm, in my entire life. I have never been so nervous or unsure about something. Why does he make me feel like this? Was it because he was a strong alpha, or was there more to it? I had no time to think about that now. Taking a deep breath, I approached the door and knocked sharply. I could hear his heartbeat on the other side. It was regular and steady. He surely knew I was on the other side with his heightened senses. "Come in," he commanded. Evenly, I swung the doors open and stepped forwards, rolling my shoulders back and keeping my head level. Alpha Gabriel. My face nonchalant. My eyes were unreadable too. "I'm here to apologize." He lifted his hypnotic eyes up to me. There wasn't a single emotion in there. No regret or pain. "You don't need to do that, Liberty," he replied, distantly. There wasn't a flicker of emotion inside of him. He was like a robot. Tangling my hands behind my back. How could he act like that? Why couldn't he show any sort of emotion? Why do you have that look of hate in your eyes? Why have you started acting so coldly towards me? Trying to keep my cool but failing. My resolve was fading so quickly. For some reason, he was hurting me so much. His cold shoulder and lack of emotion towards me pained my heart. Why was he affecting me so much? Why was I so weak when I was around him? His grey eyes stared at my face. There wasn't a flicker of emotion in his eyes. Could you hear it? Could you hear my heart breaking? I might not have been here long, but I felt a strange yet strong pull towards him. From the moment I saw him, I wanted to get to know him, but he clearly didn't want anything to do with me. Once I had done my task, I was out. "You are reading too much into this, Liberty," his voice rumbled. "And why do you care so much?" That shut me up. I didn't want to admit my feelings, only to have him crush them. The man didn't even know what love was. I stammered. Pathetically, my green eyes flitted to the ground in embarrassment. I had to repeat the truth over and over. "We weren't mates." "I don't." He arched an eyebrow. "Sure, Liberty." I stood there like a complete lemon, speechless. This was not how I thought it would go. "Look, I'm trying to apologize. Sabrina told me you might have found your true mate, and I'm getting in the way of that." His eyes snapped to mine, and finally, I saw a flash of emotion in his eyes. What it was, I could not pinpoint. "Those are just rumors. I didn't think you would believe rumors." Maintaining eye contact, he never wavered, not once. Somehow, he managed to turn the table on me. My confidence faltered. It was strange how a werewolf could make a royal falter. We were stronger than them. Hell, I was older than Alpha Gabriel by at least 50 years. Yet, you would think he was the older one. I squared my shoulders, forcing my thoughts to disappear. There was a reason I was here, and it wasn't to be dissected by Alpha Gabriel. "So are you saying you haven't found your mate?" Quirking an eyebrow. It was none of my business. Not really, but still. A part of me was desperate to know the truth. He was still sitting at his desk with a straight back and thinned lips. At my question, he tightened his hold on the pen, causing his knuckles to turn white. Deep in my heart, I knew he was hiding something big. "You seem to be awfully interested in this," he mused. "Tell me, do witches have mates?" His change in the subject made my head spin. Why did he have to be so difficult? Why was he avoiding the question? I had to think about my answer carefully. I wasn't a witch, and if I said the wrong thing, he would know I was lying about my species. Claudia the Grand, which once visited my father. I could recall shaking her head and not seeing a wedding ring. She didn't have any sort of mating marking either. When I studied witches with my tutor as a child, I remembered hearing witches were a product of dark magic. Thus, they weren't granted a gift as lovely as soulmates. They were destined to roam around the earth like humans. No, I replied. Certainly. I even added a layer of sadness to my voice for effect. He had to believe I wasn't allowed a mate. His face remained the same, passive. Do you desire a mate? My breath hitched. I couldn't hide my reaction even if I tried. Most supernatural beings wanted a mate more than anything else. However, there were a few who didn't. Alpha Gabriel was a prime example. Yes, honestly, this was a true answer. I wanted to meet my... He hummed, quietly. His voice became softer, almost compassionate. Why won't you answer my question? Are you afraid I'll tell your pack they have a Luna you don't want? He placed his pen down and rose to his feet elegantly. I watched his movements carefully, staying in my spot. He rounded the table and came to the front of his desk. My pack have been desperate for a Luna. They believe if I don't meet my mate soon, I will take Eden as my Luna, he revealed, tilting his head to the side. I knew he was observing me, gauging my reaction to his revelation. Unsatisfied I don't meet his expectations. He stepped closer, getting into my personal space. I could smell his earthly, alluring scent. It was like nothing I had ever smelt before. It intoxicated me. My skin tingled in delight at our close proximity. I didn't know what to make of any of this. A pack needs a Luna. I agreed, forcing myself to sound casual. Eden might not like me, but she seems like a good candidate. Everyone loves her. He stared at me, his grey eyes scorching my face. My pale skin was close to turning pink. It felt like he was scrutinizing me, testing me. I had the urge to want to pass his test with flying colors, to prove I was capable of defining his expectations. But the problem is, Alpha Gabriel started, his tone dropping. I don't want a Luna. Or a mate. That stung deeply. It was like he wedged a knife into my heart and began twisting it. Just to cause more pain. You make no sense. I muttered to myself. He heard me with his talented hearing abilities and smirked. The way I see it, mates are only a nuisance. My sole duty is to protect my pack. If we were to be attacked, my wolf would demand I protect my mate at all costs. He would forget about his responsibilities as alpha, sacrificing them for his mate. The bond and what it leads to sickens me. From the moment I met him, I knew he cared about his pack. All of his members admired him dearly. He devoted his entire life to his pack. What he said was understandable, but it was based on speculation. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylen Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. If the pack is attacked, if I have to make a choice, I found it hard to agree with him because he clearly didn't think about his own happiness. Being selfless wasn't a bad thing. It was quite the opposite, actually. But there was a limit. He surpassed that. Alpha Gabriel was willing to sacrifice everything in his life for his pack. Even my own family couldn't say the same thing. Sure, they would die for their kingdom, but they'd also die for family. People around you made you stronger. Alpha Gabriel didn't realize that by being alone, he didn't have anyone who could support him. He was alone. Thus, I just couldn't accept his answer. Ultimately, he was endangering his pack by putting all of the responsibility on his shoulders. One day you'll realize having a mate is a blessing, not a curse. You will see family makes you stronger, I announced, boldly. His face fell, leading me to believe he thought he got through to me. For some reason, he wanted me to understand his reasoning. I sauntered out of the room with my head held high. His words cut deep inside of me. I just couldn't let him know that. As I walked away from Alpha Gabriel's office, I realized I had failed my task. The air hadn't been cleared. If anything, I just complicated things further. For the first time in a while, I spoke to Carrie. She was in the common room, alone, scrubbing the floor. At the sound of my arrival, her back stiffened. I heard her exhale dramatically and sneak a peek under her lashes. Lowering myself to her level, I grabbed a spare cloth and helped her clean the floor. I didn't say anything straight away, letting her get used to my presence. "What do you want, Liberty?" she asked in a not so pleasant voice. She lifted her dark eyes to mine, reading the pensive expression planted on my face. I wondered what went through her mind at the moment. What did she think of me? "I was checking up on you," I replied, evenly. An image of her sitting on the stairs, crying, flashed in my mind. She scrubbed the floor vigorously, keeping her eyes on the squeaky clean floor. "I'm fine, Liberty," she snapped. Strands of her dark hair fell around her, creating a curtain. I didn't let her tone affect me. "You know, I'm here if you need me. I won't judge you," I murmured, softly. She faltered, no doubt surprised by my words. I hadn't seen her much recently. She must have thought I had forgotten about her. I just wanted to remind her I was still here. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I let my words hang in the air. In Hyazen, in my eyes, Carrie was alone. I had never seen anyone approach her or talk to her. She didn't have any friends. When people passed her, they ignored her. In all honesty, it was a little strange. Wolves were very friendly with their members, yet they weren't with her. She was an outsider. I guess one could say I pitied her, but I would never admit that to her. She would hate that. For the next half hour, we polished the floor until I could see my own reflection. Then, Carrie muttered something about going to the bathroom and never returned. I said everything I wanted to say to her, so I didn't try and find her. I sauntered out of the house and bumped into Gamma Gomez. He grunted at the sight of me. There was no malice or hate in his brown orbs. He wasn't like Beta Blade. At least, I didn't think he was. "Oh, sorry," I apologized, stumbling backward. He was so tall, big, and intimidating. I wondered where Sabrina was for a moment until I remembered she was preparing for her grandfather's return. Has Sabrina's grandfather arrived yet? He narrowed his eyes at me for a brief moment, and then his expression became stoic again. He was probably wondering how I knew about her grandfather. "Yes," he grumbled, crossing his arms over his broad chest. I could see why he was the Gamma of the pack. He was all muscle. Nodding my head at his simple answer, I smiled awkwardly. "Right. Thanks," I replied and stalked past him. My heart felt heavy from my meeting with Alpha Gabriel. My feelings were starting to catch up with me. Thinking back to what I said to him, I can't help but wince. I did not go about it the right way. One day, he would see sense and would understand he didn't have to be alone anymore. Signed to myself. I strolled through the gardens, cooling off. I really needed to get over him. 20 cats out the bag, I was fairly certain Alpha Gabriel had been avoiding me like the plague. A week had passed by since my last encounter with him, where I trotted off with my head held high after giving him a speech. Since then, I barely saw him. He was always in pack meetings or training. It seemed the rogue problem at Alpha Pack was causing problems for this pack too. Alpha Gabriel had lent some of his warriors to them, and a spy was sent out to report back what was happening at Delta Moon. Sabrina was busy constantly. She was spending so much needed time with her grandparents. This gave me the opportunity to read more of the book. Everything I discovered about Diana and Torin was horrifying. It seemed my family kept so many secrets. I flicked through a few entries, all dated at staggered times. My eyes landed on one entry a year later, where it said they were living the human realm. I gasped in shock and turned back a page to the last entry. "Dear reader, we have escaped. We are free. Prince Peyton helped us and brought us back to our homeland. Everything feels different now, though. Diana has nightmares often and is worried we will be captured again. I am always on guard. During the full moon, we both transform into wolves. We can never go back home anymore. Diana says we can make a new home here. She wants to move on. I do, but I am wary. Touring. The next entry describes an event where Diana accidentally bit a human. The bite made them transform into a wolf. Realizing they could build a pack to protect themselves, they offered to buy twitting humans who wanted a different life. Soon, they created a large pack. They became the first werewolf pack. It was astonishing to read the origins of werewolves. Diana and Tori were the first alpha and Luna ever. So what went wrong? Nobody had heard of them before. It sounded like they were getting a happy ending, but there was more. My thoughts were cut short when I felt the presence of somebody outside my door. My back arched up and the hairs on my arms stood up. It was Alpha Gabriel. He was outside of my room for some reason. I tuned into the sounds he made carefully, noting his irregular heart rate. Then, he sauntered off, making my heart deflate. What did I think was going to happen? It was better if we steered clear of each other anyway. Sighing, I put the book down and left my room. My feet trudged down the stairs and into the kitchen. Oddly, it was empty. This was unusual. Normally, there was always somebody in here, cooking or cleaning. I made myself a coffee and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. When I spun around, I found my face nearly mashed into somebody's chest. My heart was hammering in my chest. Alpha Gabriel. I cleared my throat, putting some distance between us. His grey eyes evaluated me. I had barely seen him all week, which made me fear. But he was here now and so close, forcing my eyes to remain on his handsome face. "What are you doing here?" I asked and then mentally slapped myself at my stupid question. "I live here. Enthusiasm, liberty. Can I not roam into my own rooms?" He replied, and for a moment, I swore I saw his eyes flash in amusement. It was strange seeing him talk like that. My jaw unhinged in shock and I spluttered like an idiot. He made me act so nervous. Why was he acting like this? The last time we spoke, I said some badass things and then sauntered out of his room, leaving him dumbfounded. Yet here he was, staring at me with mild amusement. Perhaps he has short-term memory, clearing my throat. I watched him blink and then step back. Something inside of him had changed. I couldn't see it first, but now I could. He appeared apprehensive about something. That might explain the humor these nerves made him act out of turn. The question on my mind then was, what was making him act like this? This man before me was a completely different person. The Alpha Gabriel I met and knew was closed off, cold, and hidden from view. He was open the last time we met, but for the wrong reasons. Where was the man that was pushing me away? "You're different." Trailing my eyes over his face curiously. He had been super busy over the past week, too busy to have some sort of self-reflection session. There were dark purple bags under his eyes. I missed this at first, but now that uttered them, I couldn't look away from them. He was not sleeping. Was I behind in some way? Had my final comment touched him more than I thought? "I want to try something." Darting his grey orbs to my lips and then back up to my face. I felt my heart accelerate and my skin prickle in anticipation. Was he going to kiss me? But I want you to know this doesn't mean anything. I didn't let his words get to me. Perhaps when I was alone later, I'd look back with a broken heart, but right now, at this moment with him, I want his soft, looking lips on mine, taking in a shaky breath. I didn't move away when he inched closer to me. My feet were stuck to the ground. "This will mean nothing to you," I whisper, entranced by his handsome face. He couldn't look away from me either. This worked both ways. I liked that it did. It felt like I was the one feeling like this the entire time, but maybe he was just better at masking his desire. "Absolutely nothing," he replied. I didn't believe him. If he wanted to kiss me, it meant something. He couldn't have met his mate. He wouldn't be doing this. I asked him about his mate in Luna. He said he didn't want one. I remembered the stinging sensation I felt. I honestly felt so sorry for the poor person who was mated to him. My body leaned closer to him as if a magnetic force was pushing us together. The world blurred away. I forgot where I was and who could walk in at any moment. Right now, it was just me and him. Alpha Gabriel and Libby. The moment his lips pressed against mine, a blinding light surged in my eyes. Pleasure and love erupted inside of my heart and flowed throughout my body. I was on fire. There was no denying it anymore. There was no hiding the truth. I had met my... This sudden and unexpected realization set a million different thoughts in my head. Firstly, I was a werewolf. In Alpha. Secondly, I could never leave this pack now. I had just endangered them. And lastly, he knew the entire time. That last once sent waves of hurt through me. He would have known who I was the moment we met. I pictured his face in the dungeons all of those weeks ago and recalled his stunned face. I should have seen it then. Then, this was followed by his harsh words last week. I don't want a Luna. He didn't want me. Every time I asked him about his mate, he would look me directly in the eye and tell me he didn't want to mate me. I meant nothing to him. The one person I was excited to meet, hell. I fled from Prince Aziel because I couldn't betray and he didn't fucking want me. I ripped myself away from him and shoved him back. Tears pooled in the corner of my eyes. I hated how my body betrayed me. Tingles fluttered on my skin. I had the urge to touch him again. His grey eyes stared at me in shock and confusion. He didn't know I had to kiss in order to know we were soulmates. This was just him kissing his unknowing mate. Why did he do that? Why now? Did my words really hit him because it came from his other half? The girl who was made for him? Or did he just want to know what it was like kissing his soulmate? Was I just a plaything he could pick up every once in a while, leading me astray? Because if that was the case, then he was just as horrible as Prince Aziel. Then I had ditched my family and homeland for the same piece of shit. It made me want to cry. He drew his eyebrows together, trying to figure out my thoughts. It eventually must have clicked. I felt a bond. Witches didn't have mates. We talked about this, but they knew what mates were. He had no clue I knew because a kiss was the way to recognize a soulmate. Libert. He never got to say what he wanted because 3 people came stumbling into the kitchen, laughing joyously. They stopped immediately at the sight of 2 of us. I lifted my green orbs up to them. I recognized Sabrina and Beta Blade instantly. Sabrina bounced her eyes between Alpha Gabriel and me in confusion whilst Beta Blade simply glared. The person in between them was an older looking man with white hair and hazel eyes. His bright eyes landed on me and widened in happiness, liberty. Stepping closer unconsciously, he looked around 70 or 80. He wasn't the tallest person I had ever met, but he definitely shared some resemblance to Sabrina and Beta Blade. He was the grandfather that arrived last week. I stared into his hazel eyes, felt a pang of melancholy shoot inside of me. He knew me and I knew him. My mouth felt dry. 21 Summer of Love Part 1. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbay. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Warm breeze flittered streets of San Francisco. Around me, young adults stumbled through the streets in their vibrant clothing, singing or laughing gleefully. They were all heading towards Haight, Ashbury, the same place I was going to. 2 men approached me. One had long shaggy brown hair and electric blue eyes, whilst the other was blonde and short. Make love, not war. Right. The shaggy haired one announced, swaying slightly. His blonde haired friend reminded me of an uptight university student. He devoured my outfit, which was a pair of denim shorts and a spaghetti crop top, with desire. Yeah, I agreed, placidly. I knew they could do nothing to me. They were humans. I was stronger than them. However, I wanted to avoid a scene at all costs. If my parents found out I used magic in public, they would cut my trip short. I had been stuck in the palace walls for years. My last visit to the human realm was 8 years ago in 1958. I spent it in England, exploring the many old cities there. This time, I decided to spend my time in America. I had heard from Atlas, who came here last year, that these past few years have been incredibly interesting here. People went wild on new drugs and alcohol. Hippies, as they were apparently called, have taken over most of the younger generation. When he told me this, my interest piqued. I arrived here yesterday after hearing from a 20-something woman that there was going to be a large concert in San Francisco today. She helped me choose my outfit and makeup. People were calling this summer the summer of love. So far, my expectations had been met. Everyone was incredibly happy. There was a sense of freedom, even though the police tailed us, watching with their shields and helmets. They would not stop these people. When I asked my friend who went by the name Dawn why the police were here, she told me about the Vietnam War. Atlas had failed to mention a war. "Are you here alone?" the shaggy-haired guy asked me. Over the loud chatter, I picked up my pace, hoping to lose this guy. "No, I'm here with a friend," I answered. Truthfully, I lost Dawn about 5 minutes ago. She spotted one of her many friends and rushed over to them, leaving me to get pulled along with the crowd. I should probably go and find her actually. The shaggy-haired guy pouted, disappointed. "Why don't you stay here with us? We can be a friend. I promise we won't try anything. We're not like that." To my audiobook coordinator, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. Holding both his hands up, I eyed the blonde guy, doubting his friend's words. This guy will definitely make a move on me. He hadn't been able to tear his eyes from me. I'm going to have to pass, but thanks. To my authentic coordinator, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. Grimacing, I quickly rushed away from them, heading forwards to the park. When I arrived, I stopped by a gigantic tree on a small hill and gasped. The large expanse was packed with people of all ages and races. A stage had been set up further ahead to my left and was playing modern music. Red cups were littered everywhere and the stench of drugs floated in the air. I was completely astounded by what I could see. Suddenly, a dainty arm wrapped around my shoulders, pulling me to a small body with questionable strength. Flickering my eyes up, I saw with relief that it was Dawn, my human friend I met yesterday. Her ginger hair was tied back in plaits and had several flowers pinned to form a halo. She had stuck flowers in my own hair, pushing my bangs back. Dawn's heart-shaped face was sprinkled with glitter. Her pale skin seemed to burn under the sun's harsh rays. "The weather today was delightful. I thought I lost you," she commented, using that nickname once again. I figured it was because she couldn't recall my real name. It was sure a coincidence she called me Fairy there. Close in species. There was no way she could know though, so I wasn't worried. But I asked her why she called me a fairy. She claimed it was because I looked like Tinkerbell, whoever that was. "This is magnificent," I said instead. "If my parents knew this was where I was, they'd probably flip." She giggled and nudged my shoulder. Instead of dallying, "We should go." I followed her through the crowd, pushing my way past people. Most people seemed overly friendly, their eyes clouded. We danced to the music, throwing back drinks. I had never experienced anything like this before. Usually, I attended formal balls with my family. They involved dances like the waltz. Not this. I jumped up and down, letting loose. I danced, screaming God knows what. I felt like I was one of them, a regular human with no responsibilities. It was blissful. It made me jealous of Dawn, who could have this sort of lifestyle. At some point, Dawn seemed to disappear. So many approached her, she had energy around her that made others want to be around her. She called you in, sighing through my nose. I tucked a strand of my light hair behind my ear and examined the area. Everywhere I turned, there was somebody singing and dancing to their heart's content. I chuckled, my head fuzzy. When was the last time I got drunk? The last time I had proper freedom was a few years ago when I went to the Dark Realm. Even then, I couldn't let loose like today. I was an ambassador for my kingdom, and so I couldn't do anything to ruin my kingdom's reputation. I was hoping I'd meet my mate there. It didn't bother me if he or she was a dark fly. They were my mate nonetheless. "Hey, are you okay?" A soft voice pulled me away from my never, twirling around elegantly. I faced a handsome man with dark brown hair and eyes. He didn't have harsh features like most guys I knew. He wasn't muscular either. Still, I got the impression he was powerful. "He's a werewolf," I realized, widening my eyes. What was a werewolf doing here? Before I left for my trip, my father warned me about hanging around other wolves. He was afraid I'd do something reckless around them. I was going to be trapped in the castle once I returned for another few years. I might as well have fun here whilst I could. This handsome man could entertain me for a bit. My brothers would do the same. I had been deprived of my nature for a while now. I needed to do something fun. He seemed nice, as well, which was a good sign. Hi, I greeted back. I'm fine. How about you? Well, I'm good now that I met you. He flirted, anxiously. It felt rather stiff, like he had never done it before. The corners of my lips quirked upwards. You seem nervous. Am I making you nervous? The man shook his head, causing strands of his hair to fall over his large eyes. I'm not nervous, just overwhelmed. My eyebrows furrowed together. Overwhelmed. Puzzled. Why are you overwhelmed? Well, I've never been to a place this busy before. My friend dragged me here, promising it wouldn't be that busy. What a coincidence. Both of our friends brought us here. It is pretty busy. I mused in agreement. Do you want to go somewhere quieter? His eyes lit up. I wrapped my fingers around his wrist and guided him through the crowds to somewhere quieter. We ended up by a small ice cream store where he proceeded to buy me some. Thanking him, we sat on the grass in a more secluded area, where groups of people were lying down, sunbathing. I felt the sun's glorious rays scorching down onto my exposed skin. I would not burn or tan, it was a curse. My skin would forever remain pale like porcelain. You never told me your name. Licking more of his ice cream, I watched him get a little bit of it on his nose. He lifted his eyes up to mine and voiced his confusion. You have ice cream on you, I answered, chuckling. His cheeks stinged a bright red color, and he turned his head away, mortified. Oh shit, I heard him curse to himself, wiping it away vigorously. When he swung his face back to me, the ice cream was gone. His face was still bright red though. Is it gone? I nodded my head, licking mine carefully. You're good. Silence ensued for a moment as he gathered his courage again. I liked how he wasn't overly confident or cocky. It was quite refreshing from the people I knew. My family was naturally confident and self-assured. It was how we were raised. Michael was the complete opposite. He tried to act confident, but not in a vain way. He was trying to impress me. He must not have found his mate yet. You still haven't told me your name. Staring at the side of my face with interest, he looked at me like I was an angel, smiling to myself. I shifted my eyes to his. I'm Liberty. 22 Summer of Love Part to 1967. My time with Michael will always be cherished. I had a connection with him that was unexplainable. It wasn't a mate bond, not even close, but it was beautiful and sweet. I cared for him deeply. We spent weeks together, roaming around America. It turned out he was backpacking around America for a year. He was always very vague when I asked him what he was going to do after traveling. I believed it was something to do with his wolf pack, assuming he was part of a pack. His friend Andrew was always very suspicious of me. When I first met him, I immediately felt his power. He was a future Al for certain. He never completely trusted me, but he liked me, I liked him. The relationship I had with Michael started off platonic. He invited me to go around California and Arizona with him. I took him up on that offer since I had nowhere else to go. I never saw my friend Don again. After a few days, I kissed Michael as we were walking along the beach at sunset. Cliché, I know. From there, romance blossomed. If anyone ever asked me if I loved Michael, I would say no. I didn't love him, but I definitely liked him and I did care about him. The 4 weeks I spent with him was the best I ever had. On the last day we spent together, I was oblivious to what was going to come. Michael, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Logan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing pursuits, enthusiasm. And I were trekking up the mountain to the Grand Canyon. It was boiling outside. The summer had to be one of the hottest on record. Beads of sweat ran down my face. My hand was glued to Michael's. I had a camera strap looped around my neck. It swished whenever I moved suddenly. Andrew was stalking ahead of us. leading the way. The boys were both carrying heavy backpacks full of camping equipment. The plan was, after seeing the Grand Canyon, we would camp somewhere not too far away and start a fire. I was looking forward to a cozy evening. "You doing okay, Libby?" Michael asked, using the same tray my family used. It warmed my heart when he first called me Libby. "Yeah." Feigning tiredness. I was not tired or out of breath at all. I had a heavy, extensive training program back home. Sure, I hadn't worked out in a while, but this still felt like nothing compared to it. Michael abruptly came to a halt, causing me to do the same. "Do you need some water?" he wondered, concerned. I smiled softly and nudged his shoulder. "You worry too much." "I'll be fine." Michael was a very caring person. Whoever his mate was lucky. He tugged his water bottle out of his backpack and shoved it in my direction, urging me to drink it. Rolling my eyes in amusement, I chugged a good deal of it and handed it back to him so that he could do the same. By now, Andrew realized we stopped and was waiting further ahead, also taking a water break. "We're nearly there," Michael informed me. Happily, sure enough, 15 minutes later, we made it to the top. Ahead of me, the area expanded endlessly. The sky was the perfect shade of blue, contrasting with the reddish, brown rocks perfectly. The sun beamed down on us as if to say it approved of us being here. I couldn't help but gawk at this place. My home was surely beautiful to most, but I was used to it. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," was different. It hadn't been crafted to perfection, but it still managed to be enchanting and ethereal nonetheless. Andrew stood at the very edge of the rock and observed the river below peacefully. His grey eyes seemed to concentrate solely on what lay beneath us. I, however, marveled at what was above and ahead. "This is like heaven," I commented, muttering to myself. Michael chuckled beside me and wrapped his arm around my waist. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Disrupting his peaceful moment. Not at all guilty. I unlooped my camera from my neck. "Can you take a photo of us?" Spinning around. His dark hair fell over his sharp face. He sighed but agreed. "Sure." I dragged Michael to where Andrew was stood and posed for the camera. My arms spread wide and a grin melted onto my face. I didn't see what Michael was doing until the flash happened. He leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, delicately. It was then my eyes widened. Instantly, I stepped back and crossed my arms over my chest. "You're so stupid sometimes." He smiled cheekily and shrugged his shoulders. I skipped over to Andrew to view the Polaroid. Michael hunched over my shoulder to get a look too. We looked cute in the photo. It was the perfect place and time for a photo. "I'm keeping that," Michael exclaimed before I could, snatching the photo out of Andrew's hand. "That's not fair. I want it," I argued. "We can take another one," Andrew suggested, seeing no reason to fight over a photo. He seemed to be very sensible. "It won't be the same. I won't be surprised," I countered, sulking playfully. It was true I wanted the photo, but I could live with Michael taking it. It'd be a souvenir of our time together. "I'm not going to give it to you, Libby," Michael said, placing the photo into his wallet. "You're so mean," I complained, jokingly. His lips stretched into a mischievous smile and he swooped in for another kiss, but this time on my lips. "I didn't feel any electricity like you should do when your mate touches you. If he was my mate, I should have known the first time we kissed. He wasn't, but I didn't mind. I probably wouldn't find my mate for a long time. None of my older brothers had. It could take a whole century for a Phi to find her." Andrew insisted we leave when it got past 5, taking one last look at the expanse ahead. I sighed in awe. I would never forget this place. Maybe one day I could come back here. We made camp in a secluded area. I could still hear the chatter and laughter of groups of young people, but they were far enough where it wasn't a bother. We had seen a lot of Volkswagen campervans on the drive here. It was the trend of the decade, apparently. Whilst the boys began pitching the tent, I worked on tea. We didn't have lots, but I knew I could make something out of what we had. As we ate tea, I had somebody from one of the other campers play the guitar skillfully. Unconsciously, I swayed to the soft melody, embracing the calmness that washed over me. At this moment, I was happy. There was no burden on my back. I forgot about my family. I was simply happy with my boyfriend. Michael pulled out his harmonica and played his own tune. It was nowhere near as good as the guitar playing, but it made me get up and dance around the fireplace with Andrew. When it got dark and the crickets started chirping, I went to bed. The boys followed soon after. Andrew had his own small tent whilst I shared one with Michael. We snuggled up together. However, sleep evaded me. I tried for a thought out, but I couldn't seem to drift off. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. I peeled Michael's arm off my waist and tiptoed out of the tent. I nearly shrieked when I spotted my brother, Jacob, sitting on the same log I was sitting on 2 hours ago, wearing a grim expression. "Brother, you scared me," I whispered, placing a hand over my racing heart. What was Jacob doing here? Jacob stretched his long legs out in front of him and pinched his lips together. His green eyes had flecks of blue in them. He was the only one of us to have this. It made him unique from the rest of us. His near, white hair was longer than my other brothers. It brushed against his shoulders, flowing down in small waves. Jacob examined my clothes from head to toe. "What are you doing here?" I queried, moving towards him steadily. If I was forced to say who my favorite brother was, I would say Jacob. We always had this bond that nobody else could understand. We used to pull pranks on the staff at the castle when we were growing up. Atlas and Kaelin would sometimes join in. We had to stop once my mother caught us. She then decided I should attend lessons on how to be a queen. Jacob patted the seat beside him. I treaded closer towards him, erring to the side of caution. My siblings created a set of rules for us when we came to the human realm. The first rule, and one we held the dearest, was to not interfere with what we do here. We are all trapped at home in some way. The human realm is a place where we can temporarily. What we do here is up to us. Jacob being here breaks our number one rule. Lowering myself into the seat beside him, I watched the remaining embers flicker in the fireplace. "You need to come back, Libby." Clenching his jaw, I immediately rose to my feet. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. "What are you talking about?" "I'm not leaving." Jacob arched both his eyebrows, remaining calm and sensible. "I would keep it down if I were you, otherwise your wolves will wake up." My eyes snapped towards both tents. I could hear the sounds of their even breathing. They were still asleep, thankfully. Turning back to my brother, I stood in front of him with a furious expression planted on my face. "This is unfair. Jacob, why are you here? I still have plenty of time left." For a moment, Jacob's eyes softened. Over the past few years, he had hardened his exterior. I blamed the warrior training he had been doing. I barely saw him anymore. He was always practicing. "I'm sorry, Libby, but you're getting too close to that wolf. Have you forgotten he has a mate out there?" He reminded me, harshly. I swallowed the lump in my throat, conflicted. He, unfortunately, had a point. I could never have a long-term relationship with Michael. The moment his mate came along, he would dump me, instantaneously. Vi, and especially royals, had an aura that makes us desirable. Nobody could resist us. That appeal did not stand a chance against the mate bond. The moon goddess wanted nothing to come in between her children's happiness. "Why do you have to do this to me? My relationship with Michael will never make it that far." I fought back, refusing to give up. I had a whole year in human years on Earth. I was not going to waste my time. Jacob sent me a disbelieving look, seeing right through me. I could not guarantee that my feelings for him would not deepen. Love could spring up on people randomly when they least expected it. Jacob knew this better than anyone. He was the biggest womanizer out of our family. He was never cruel to women, He just loved spending as little time as possible. I tried to ask him why he went through them so easily, but he would never open up. Is that really why you're here? To warn me of a boy? I fired back, crossing my arms over my chest. Sassy lie. His arrival wasn't fair. I didn't meddle when he came here. Jacob exhaled loudly, rubbing the back of his neck. We all found out what you were doing here and got worried. We voted on if we should come and get you and who would tell you. I voted against, if that's any consolation. My glare softened slightly at this. Let me guess. The twins and Morpheus voted for me coming home. I muttered. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Jacob pressed his lips together and nodded his head. Well, at least I had Declan and Jacob on my side. I'm not going home. My time is not up. I made myself adamantly clear. I'm not saying you return home. I'm simply saying you need to leave him, he clarified, darting his bluish-green eyes to Michael's tent. A foreign emotion bubbled inside of my chest. I realized I was going to miss Michael. But Jacob was making a valid point. If I continued to stay with him, my heart would get hurt. It would be difficult and Michael would definitely hate me, but it seemed I needed to leave. I don't know whether I should continue hating you for a bit longer or be thanking you, I commented. His face shone with amusement. I was glad to see a smile on his face. It made my own lips quirk upwards. You can thank me later, sis. I think we should go before one of them wakes up. Standing up, releasing a breath I didn't know I was holding in, I sneak into my tent and carefully grab a few items I acquired over the last few weeks. As I stepped out, my foot landed on a tree branch. It crunched, the sound bouncing off the trees. Stilling, I threw my head in Michael's direction. He was still lying on the ground, snoring lightly, sighing in relief. I continued stepping toward Jacob. He surveyed the area like a predator and guided me through the trees. Wordlessly, Jacob, where are you taking me? I asked once we were out of hearing range. The sky was murky tonight, the stars hard to see. I want to go somewhere where there's plenty of space for me to open a portal. He informed me, throwing his answer over his shoulder casually. So, you picked the smallest straw. Making conversation, he smiled at me. Yeah, I did, but I bet you bet it's me who came. Oh yeah, I replied. Immediately. I don't think I could handle Kaelin's teasing. Jacob chuckled quietly. You always give him a reason to tease you. Isibi. He tucked in. Jacob stopped where there was enough space to open a portal. I stared at him anxiously, ready for him to open a portal. I assumed he was going to take me into another realm or onto a different country. My heart stuttered at the thought. I was really enjoying my trip around America. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I sadly floated my eyes around the woods one last time, breathing in the warm air. Jacob placed one foot back to steady himself and flicked his wrist. Dramatically, a burst of light popped into existence from the ground up. It was at least 2 meters tall and made my heart warm. Magic ignited something instinctual in me. I rarely used it since I was not as good as my brothers, but that didn't mean I hated it. That was when I heard a familiar, soothing voice. Liberty. Jacob and I both froze. Panic rose inside of me. Nobody is supposed to find out about my kind. Liberty. What's going on? Where are you going? He fired more questions. Rose idly. He must have woken up quite recently. I slowly turned my attention to him and stared deeply into his hazel eyes. His confusion was evident. There was also a spark of fear embedded in his brown orbs. I released an irving breath, unsure of how to proceed. Michael's eyes trailed towards the portal and enlarged as wide as saucers. What is that? Stumbling back, pursing my lips, I mulled over my best option. If I told him the truth, our secret would be out. I would have broken my family's rule. However, if I don't tell him the truth, he would know there was something I was hiding. He might try seeking the truth, which could lead to others finding out. I risked a look at Jacob. His fingers were curled together into a fist and there was a crease between his brows, telling me he was deep in thought. Answer me. He continued to prod us, his hazel eyes flashing. His wolf was pushing forwards. Unsettled, he could see the portal as a weapon. I need you to calm down, I warned in a low voice. He started shaking like a leaf. Explain. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I need you to promise you won't tell anybody else. It's vital you don't utter another word of what you've seen or what I'm about to tell you. His face showed his conflict. I could imagine this was difficult. In a way, it must feel like a betrayal. I felt sympathetic towards him, which was why I was trying not to overreact or yell at him for following me. You can't, he was interrupted by my older brother. Liberty. Realizing what I was about to do. You can't do this. I have to, I replied, solemnly. Michael watched our exchange and became aware of Jacob's presence. Who are you? He asked Jacob. Venomous lie. The switch of emotions made my head spin. Are you her boyfriend? He thought Jacob was my boyfriend. Did he really think I wasn't loyal to him? I'm sure he saw how hurt I was. Jacob is my brother, I answered clearly and firmly. I hoped he could see in my eyes that I would never cheat on him. I wasn't that type of person. Momentarily stunned, he blinked. Oh, he said, dumbly. Michael, I'm a fae. I've had to keep my existence a secret to protect my world. I'm not allowed to tell anyone. I revealed, stalking over to him. His already wide eyes grew bigger, if that was possible. What? Fae aren't. They are old folk tales. I shook my head. We made sure they were. You see, if people find out about us, they will come for our power. My family, the royal family, decided it would be best if we wiped people's memories of us. 2 wolves, vampires, and humans. We are not real. Do you understand what I'm saying? His eyes bounced between the two of us like a tennis ball. Michael, you can't tell anybody. Coldly, I didn't mean for it to come out in a hostile manner, but I couldn't stress how important this was. You can't tell your family. Or your mate. This has to be a secret. He sucked in a shuddering breath. You're serious? Yes, silence ensued. I stared at him in trepidation, waiting for him to say something. Anything. Okay. He eventually complied, lifting his eyes to me. A sigh of relief passed through me. My tense shoulders dropped. Behind me, Jacob to let out a small breath. He would be blamed too if things got out. Thank you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sincerely, my arms were to wrap around his body one last time. Are you going to leave me then? Sadly, I nodded my head. It's for the best. I'm sorry I was going to leave without saying anything. He looked away, hoping to hide his emotions. Yet, I still managed to witness his face morph into one of pain. Hurting him was inevitable. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. His voice thick with emotion. Before I could overthink anything, I stepped forwards and embraced him in a hug. He stilled in either fear or emotional pain. I tried to not let that affect my judgment. I rose to my tippy toes and leveled my face with his ear. Goodbye, I whispered. Softly. Michael inhaled sharply. I pulled away, smiling awkwardly. Jacob held out his hand for me. I took it gratefully as we headed towards the glowing portal. Just before I stepped through, I glanced over my shoulder at Michael. He held a hand to his heart. His lips mashed together. His eyes swirled with so many different feelings. And then, Jacob and I walked through. The portal closed behind us. We landed in my homeland but far away from the castle. My parents would never know I returned. You could have wiped his memory, Jacob commented, furrowing his brows together. The problem with wiping someone's memory was that it could often affect other memories. It was dangerous. I didn't want him to forget me. I mumbled, tucking strands of my hair behind my ear. Jacob smiled wryly. Right. Well, I guess this is where we part ways. Where are you going to go now? I think Asia. It didn't take me long to answer. Going back to America, even though the chances of bumping into Michael was close to zero, would be too agonizing. I needed to go somewhere far away. Have fun then. Stay safe. He wished and strolled away, whistling a soft tune, shaking my head. I focused on a picture of Tokyo that I had seen a few years ago. In order to open a portal, you had to have an image of where you were going. The portal sprung in front of me. I tightened my backpack and took one last look at my home. I made the right choice leaving Michael. I might not feel like it now, but I'm right. 23 blast from the past, my god. You haven't aged a day. He blurted out, stunned. His kind eyes assessed me from head to toe in awe. It had been so long since I last saw him. Over 50 years to be exact. During that time, he had really lived his life. I always wondered what happened to him. I hoped he would have had a happy life. The three others bounced their inquisitive gazes between us, eager to ask questions but also reluctant to ruin this moment. They watched the scene unfold. It's been a while, I muttered, sadly. Michael nodded his head, smiling softly. He was always a gentle soul. Even now, I could see he hadn't let that characteristic disappear. Roughly 50 years, huh? He replied, letting it slip. The cat was already out of the bag. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I couldn't lie about how I met him. But now I wasn't a witch. Witches age like humans. Half witches would never have that ability. Sabrina's hazel eyes that she shared with her grandfather widened as big as saucers. Even Beta Blade appeared lost and unsure. Granddad. Keeping his voice quiet. How do you know, Liberty? You couldn't have met that long ago. I had never seen him talk like that before. Where was the stone? Cold. Pissed off, Beta. Perhaps around family. He let his mask fall off. Or maybe he was just stunned. Michael silently asked me for permission to tell them. They were family after all. Either way, they'd know the truth. I couldn't lie to them, especially Alpha Gabriel. Just thinking about him made my heart stutter painfully. He was pinching my lips together. I nodded my head, giving him permission. We did, my dear boy, Michael replied, placing his hand on Beta Blade's shoulder. The summer of 1967. I smiled fondly, recalling flashes of those easy-going moments. Life was simpler then. San Francisco. The festival. I added, mating Michael's orbs. He had not changed besides his age. In my eyes, he would always be the nervous man who got ice cream over his face. My smile widened at the memory. That Beta Blade cleared his throat, shaking away his thoughts. That still doesn't explain anything. Alpha Gabriel was watching everything silently. I noted his fingers were curled into a fist and his jaw was locked. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. As for Sabrina, she was struggling to wrap her head around everything. She was listening. That was clear, but she was finding it difficult to accept this turn of events. Sensing his granddaughter's unease, he offered us to go and sit down at one of the tables. It was a good idea since anybody could walk in and notice the shift in the atmosphere. Sitting in the corner, away from everyone, would make our talk more private. Before sitting down, Michael grabbed a glass of water for Sabrina. She eagerly took it and gulped down the entire glass in no time at all. Well, we met when I was on my gap year with Alpha Gabriel's grandfather. Throwing a look at his Alpha. Holy shit, Andrew was Gabriel's grandfather. I couldn't believe it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You see, there was news in San Francisco that there was going to be a festival of love. Everybody was going to be there. I'm telling you, kids. The streets were packed. It was an incredible experience. He told them, his eyes glazing over at the memory. Blade cleared his throat, gaining his grandfather's attention. Excusing himself, he continued, To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, parts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Andrew got swept up in the crowd, and so I decided to explore the large park. I ended up by the main stage where band was playing. That's when I saw Libby. She was easily the most beautiful creature there. I sent him a small smile, aware of Alpha Gabriel's scorching days on the side of my face. I was beginning to think he really was jealous. Blade and Sabrina looked slightly repulsed. I went over to her and stuttered like a complete fool. She was the first girl I had ever properly sought out. I was nervous as hell, but that didn't stop me. Libby was so sure of herself, though. She ended up taking the lead, chuckling to himself. You weren't a fool, I assured him, softly. I was glad you could get me away from the crowd. I felt like I was being eaten up. Michael grinned. What happened from there? Blade pried, bringing the subject back. Well, Michael coughed. We hit it off. I invited Libby to travel with Andrew and me. We traveled through the west of California and to Arizona. The last day I saw Libby, we had just gone to the Grand Canyon. I still have the picture. He rummaged through his jacket pocket and pulled out an old leather wallet. I watched his frail fingers brush over some cards into a small pocket. He produced a worn-out piece of paper and unfolded it. My heart skipped a beat at the sight of it. I thought I'd never see that again. I muttered, leaning over to get a better look. The others did the same too. It was the picture Andrew reluctantly took. The canyon was in the background and the sky was bright blue. What everyone focused on was the two of us. My arms were spread out wide and a cheeky grin was on my face. Michael was pecking my cheek, which caused my green eyes to widen and my eyebrows to raise in shock. I hadn't seen that photo in so long. I looked happy. Was this before you met Gran? Sabrina queried. Quietly. She couldn't seem to look at me. Yes, Brina. I would have never cheated on your grandmother, Michael said instantly. Then Michael turned his attention back to me. I never broke your promise. Libby, I never told anybody. He was referring to the night Jacob came. I made him swear he'd never tell anybody who I was. What are you talking about? Blade asked quickly. The night I left. I answered when nobody else did. All eyes were on me. His eyes were the ones I cared about the most. It felt wrong speaking about this. I had been brought up with this heavy burden I could never tell any other supernatural creature who I was. My existence was a threat. Now, for the second time in my life, I was breaking that rule. If my parents ever found out, they'd butcher me. We set up camp about a mile from the canyon. It was a normal night. I went to bed early because I was tired, but I woke up to some rustling. That was when I got up. Was that when you saw Jacob? Michael cut in, hearing some of this for the first time too. I was surprised he remembered Jacob's name. For the first time since they arrived, Alpha Gabriel spoke. He swung his intense gaze to me, pinning my stare down. Who is Jacob? Well, this will prove how much of a liar I am. They believed I was an only child. My brother, Sabrina gasped. We once had a conversation about our families and I blatantly lied and said I was an only child. Hurt crossed her pretty face. I threw her an apologetic look, knowing it was all I could do right now. You have a brother? Alpha Gabriel queried, trying to figure me out. He, along with Beta Blade, always knew there was more to my story. However, I always thought Gabriel believed me. With Beta Blade, I knew he thought everything was a lie. My shoulders slumped. I have 5 brothers. You're not a half, which are you? Beta Blade accused, narrowing his eyes at me. He was back to his hating self. I was almost glad he had returned. No, I shook my head. Shamefully. I felt awful lying to them. They didn't deserve this. They had taken me in, sheltered, and protected me. Sabrina tried to be my friend, and I lied to her. Then what are you? This came from Sabrina, who hardened her tone. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. This was proving to be very difficult. She's royalty. Michael butted in, choosing the worst possible thing to say. I didn't want them to know that as well. Not yet. I shot him a disapproving glance and loosened a tense breath, preparing myself for an onslaught of questions. Royalty. I beg your pardon. These two came from the siblings. Gabriel, as usual, kept quiet. He was silently taking everything in, rationalizing. They already know so much. Libby, you can trust them as you trusted me. Michael encouraged me, soothingly. Sucking in a breath, I evaluated all of their expressions. Blade and Sabrina stared at me with shock. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. And a little bit of curiosity. The man beside me, the man who was my remained emotional sis. I was still pissed at him. But now, he could be pissed at me too. Had you ever heard of Phi? I watched his reaction, worried and interested to see what little tells he showed Phi. I heard Sabrina murmur in perplexion. Like fairies. A bubble of laughter passed through my lips. Many people assumed we were some sort of fairies. We were not. Some Phi even got offended when we were compared to them. No, I eventually replied as I sobered up. Phi. Immortal creatures who don't possess wings and turn tiny. Oh, she blinked, slumping back in her seat. Are you mocking us? Blade queried, sending me an icy stare. No, I don't know how to approach this. My people have been sworn to secrecy. Our existence is dangerous. We're not allowed to reveal ourselves to anybody, and so we never have to talk about who we are. I explained, the words tumbling out of my mouth in a silly manner. I was not explaining things well. Take your time, Gabriel said to me, gently. I nearly jolted in my seat at the sound of his smooth voice. I expected him to sound furious. I was certainly furious with him. We used to live in harmony with the supernatural world, but one day, my grandfather closed our portals to the other worlds. Nobody knows why except for the council. The royals, my family, changed the law. We were never allowed to tell anybody else of our existence. But why? Sabrina wondered. We are powerful creatures. We have magic like witches, but ours is stronger. We can manipulate and control things without paying a price. Our magic originated because of a gift. Witches' magic came from the darkness. I told them, recalling Claudia's story. They all seemed fascinated now. Any trace of us vanished. The only people aside from my people who know about us are the Supernatural Council. Michael and now. You. I stopped, combing a hand through my messy hair. So why are you here? Why are you not in your palace? Blade asked. Bitterly. He hated that I lied, understandable. I nervously chuckled, averting my eyes away from Gabriel completely. That's a story for another time. Silence followed as they all processed this information. Even Michael learned a few new things. Do you have any more questions? I gave them the opportunity to find out more, whilst I had the strength to continue. As soon as this was over, I would need to be alone and figure out everything. I haven't even had the time to properly think about my bond with Gabriel. So, are you like old? Sabrina asked, tilting her head to the side. I'm not that old. I'm the youngest out of all of my siblings. I'm 82 years old. In your world, that means I was born in 1938. I did the maths in my head quickly. I never really thought about what year my birth was to them. I aged differently to any other supernatural creature. That's another reason we had to hide. Immortality is something people will kill over. Vampires were immortal, but they didn't have powers like us. We had both, which made us very desirable. So, who's on your throne? Is it your parents? Sabrina asked, glancing at her brother. They probably used their mind link to discuss this. My parents passed the crown to my oldest brother, Morpheus, a few years ago. He is currently the ruler and will be for a few centuries. Thinking about Morpheus made me sad. I haven't seen him in over a week. He has been tied down with politics back home. Plus, the last I heard, he was on the hunt for Prince Aziel. The thought of Prince Aziel finding me now sent shivers down my spine. There was still so much more to discuss. I knew that. But I couldn't bring myself to talk anymore right now. I had revealed so much. It seemed my strength started to wane easily. The mere thought of Prince Aziel and his horribleness made me afraid. Do you mind if I have some space? I shifted myself so that this was directed at Gabriel. His soft lips were pressed together firmly. At my request, he stared into my green eyes and saw the desperation. His grey orbs did not soften this time, but he did let me leave. We'll talk more later. I rushed out of the room and headed back to my own room. My fingers brushed against the doorknob, prepared to swing the door open, but I froze, recalling the pain Gabriel caused. I can't sit in my room and dawdle without asking Gabriel why he never said anything. I'll talk to him and then I'll find a way to contact Morpheus. He will be able to help me. With that in mind, I marched to the kitchen but find everyone gone. He must be in his office. I make my way to his office and come to a halt when I heard voices in there. Gabriel and Blade's voices. And they're talking about me.